Good morning, everybody. Morning's Friday morning, right? Last session. My name's David Marks. I represent the Hartford Mutual Funds. Some of you in the room I know. We appreciate the opportunity through Marshall Parker this morning. And I'm going to introduce Steve Nezas, who's our speaker here in a second. But this is, if you are insurance licensed or CFP licensed, I started the sign-in sheets at this end. We'll just kind of pass them across the row. Just make sure that you sign in. You'll see on there that there's a spot to check off CFP or CE for insurance. If you're not licensed, just pass it along to the next person. If you are, take a moment and fill it out. You should see the template across the top of there. If you're not licensed, like I said, you can skip it. Make sure, I know this seems like a silly reminder, but make sure you print clearly so our CE department can give you the necessary credit for both or for CPE, or excuse me, for CE or CFP. I understand through Melissa that you're getting continuing ed if you are an accountant or licensed in the area of accounting, that you're getting 2 credits, I believe, for CPE for attending this whole session today. So this is just for continuing ed for insurance and for CFP credits, just so we're clear. If you have any questions at the end, just come find myself or Steve. We can certainly guide you through it, but it should be pretty self-explanatory once you get the sign-in sheet. So let me, as I said, I cover Hartford Mutual Funds. Hartford's been in the news a lot lately. If you have questions on that, certainly see me afterwards. One of the things that I've enjoyed about working with the Hartford over the last 12 plus years is, besides having great products, we also offer, we try to offer continuing education, what we call non-product or more value-add type of presentation. So this is just an example today of straight talk with Social Security, but we do a lot of work on estate planning, IRA planning, distribution planning. We did a lot of work on the Roth conversion a couple years ago, and that was a hot topic. So we try to bring topics to you all that are relevant, and I know for those of you that work with us on the advisor side, you've probably seen that from us over the years. So I want to turn it over to Steve here in a second. He's going to walk you through the slides. They are in the packet if you have it in front of you, if you want to take notes or if you have a question while he's going through some of the material. And as I said, I represent Hartford Funds, so if you have questions on that, just see me afterwards. So Steve, who's standing behind me, has actually been in the industry for 20 plus years, a little over 14 with the Hartford. Most of his time's been spent in advanced markets and advanced planning, so that's why we thought he'd be a good speaker here today. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Steve, thanks for coming down from Connecticut, and the floor is yours. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, David, and thanks for everybody for having us in. So what we're going to do is, first of all, in your book, there's a few things in the booklet here. If you have your booklets, the neat thing is we're about 4 pages from the end. So if you flip open, you'll see that if you can find the page that has a slide with FDR on it, I'm going to have you all take a couple of notes here. So the title of this discussion is Straight Talk on Social Security. So as David mentioned, I'm with the Hartford. I'm not with the Social Security Administration. So if you have questions, there's a decent chance I'll be able to answer it for you. But if you have a question specific to a case that you're working on or what have you, just do me a favor, catch me at the end, because I have a couple of examples, a couple of case studies that are pretty common to what we come across. And when we put this continuing education class together, we have about a dozen or 15 topics that we do. But when we put this particular class together, we did it from a perspective of the common questions that we receive, because I travel across the country. I have 2 other counterparts, and we see a lot of folks, we meet with a lot of clients, and we just see there's a common theme, a common sort of recurring bill of questions, so to speak. So what we're going to talk about are some of the changes for 2012. There was some cost of living adjustments, things like that. Nothing too crazy. We're going to talk about some of the things that we're seeing potentially on the horizon for Social Security. And then we're going to cover a few points in particular that clients tend to get confused with, and even advisors tend to get confused with. So just a quick show of hands. Do we have any financial advisors in the room? Okay, cool. So we have CPAs and attorneys primarily. Okay, so I'm going to spend some time, more time on some slides than others. So this is actually a class that's designed for advisors, CPAs, and attorneys, depending on the audience. So jumping right into it, just a little bit of a history on Social Security. It was actually based on the Social Security Act of 1935. And what folks don't sometimes know is that Social Security came into the picture because of the decline of farms. Is that kind of a shock? You know, at the turn of the 20th century, what was occurring at the turn of the 20th century? Industrial Revolution. Yeah, so people were moving away from the farms into the cities, and as they moved away from the farms into the cities, you know, farming went on the decline. And traditionally, prior to that, where did folks retire to, or where did they tend to spend their, you know, their remaining years in their lives? On the farm. So when you have a decline in the farms, you don't have a place where people can go to spend the rest of their lives. So back in 1935, FDR put the Social Security Act into place where they realized that folks needed to have some sort of a subsidy in their retirement. And back then, you know, folks were living just a few years, you know, they wore their bodies out basically and lived a few years in their retirement. But interestingly, back in 1940, the first benefits were paid out. Has anybody ever heard of Ida Mae Fuller? Yeah, okay. We're from Ludlow, Vermont. She was the first person to receive a Social Security check. Does anybody know how much she contributed to Social Security in the 3 years prior to her receiving? Yeah, it was tiny. It was $22.54 from 1938, 37, 38, and 39. So she received her first check in January of 1940, and it was just a hair under that $22.54 she put in. It was like $22.20 or something like that. So by the time she received her next check, she beat the bank. How long did Ida Mae Fuller live, you know?
30 years.
100. She lived to 100 years old. You know how much she collected from Social Security? $22,888 on a $22 investment. That's not too bad, guys, right? So, anyway, so as we go down you know, through the years, Lyndon Johnson adds Medicare back in 1965, and then in 2010, President Obama, you know, he sets up a commission to shore up the Social Security system. So, you know, throughout the day, you've heard, you know, all kinds of things, and you know, people need a lot of help. Well, what are some of the things that we're hearing in terms of the Social Security system that they're looking at doing in terms of shoring it up?
Stop sending the statements.
Pardon?
Stop sending.
Yeah, they stopped sending the statements. But actually, they're going to start sending those out again. I forgot what the age group is, but they're going to actually start sending them out. But yeah, they saved a lot of money by stopping sending the statements. But what are some of the things, though? Seriously, what have we heard about?
Direct deposit.
Okay, and you know, they may be raising the retirement age.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What else? Taking money from some programs to help with others. Right? We've heard about that. We heard about maybe means testing. Folks who maybe make a lot of money, maybe they're, you know, depending on how much money they make, they might not, you know, receive as much benefit. Some of the things that we're also hearing is that, you know, folks that are 55 years old, they're, you know, that right now, that they're not going to have to be so concerned about Social Security coming down, you know, in the future, because, you know, they're closer to retirement than others. I'm 44, so yeah, there's a lot more time for, you know, for me to consider options for retirement. But folks who are over 55 years old, they're typically, you know, they're saying that's sort of like the benchmark. They're going to try to preserve that. Well, interestingly, I was up in at my in-laws in central Wisconsin a couple months ago, and down in the rec room, my stepmom is awesome. She's retired, and she helps out in Wisconsin Rapids with the local retirees who their taxes every year. So we were up there, and you know, I like to pick her brain. She picks mine a little bit, and I'm by no means a tax professional, but we're talking about Social Security, and anyway, I go down to the rec room, and I see on the floor in the rec room, there's a Reader's Digest on the floor. And it has this big thing, Social Security reform. And so it's like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I sat down and picked it up and started flipping through it. And sure, you know, they're talking about, you know, 55 years old. We're talking about, you know, raising retirement limits and things like that. So I'm like, oh, this is a great article. So I went upstairs and I said, "What? You mind if I maybe rip the pages out of this when you're finished, or if maybe you can just rip them out and send them to me, or photocopy them?" And I said, "This is a terrific article." And she said, "Steve, look at the date on the cover." I flip it, I close it. It was from 2003. Okay, so they're talking about, since then, almost a decade. 55 years old is sort of the benchmark they're trying to set to make sure folks are going to be okay. But they were talking about raising the age limits. They were talking about, you know, doing a whole lot of different things that we're hearing now. So some of the things that we're hearing now, they've been talking about for a long time. So there's nothing earth-shattering that's coming out at this point in time, especially in an election year. Because what politician who wants to keep their job in Washington or get a job in Washington is gonna talk about doing anything to Social Security at this point? We're probably gonna hear stuff after the election, but at least this year, we're probably not gonna hear a whole lot. Okay, so let's talk about some of the basics. We have about 160 million people who work and contribute to Social Security. That's about half of America. So right now, 52 million people receive monthly Social Security benefits. The thing is, Social Security was never meant to be the main staple in terms of what their retirement was going to be based upon. A lot of folks don't realize it. They don't realize what the Social Security limits are in terms of what the maximum they could potentially get. So if we talk about some of the things that, in terms of taxes and credits, for 2012, this is a change actually, this is an update from last year. They're going to be, the Social Security is going to tax earnings up to $110,100. What was it up to this point? 106,800. Yeah, so they bumped it up a little bit. And in terms of credits, typically you have to work about 10 years. You can earn 4 credits per year, and the amount of earnings that you have to reach at this point is a little bit higher than it has been previously. So for every $1,130 you earn, you get a credit. So you can earn a maximum of 4 credits in a particular year. And again, typically you have to work about 10 years to receive that. So this is interesting. 2012, the maximum monthly Social Security retirement payment to someone retiring at 66 is $2,513. That's the absolute maximum that you can receive per month at full retirement age at this point. People sometimes don't, because they don't plan it far ahead enough, they don't realize what the maximum potential will be from Social Security. They don't, how often, I mean, we're all planners in here. When you talk to clients, when do people typically think about when they're going to receive Social Security benefits? Like months before? Do they think years before? Maybe, sometimes. Most of the time it's like, oh wait, I'm about to become 62, I can start taking benefits. They just say, oh, well if I can get it, I'm going to take it. Well, that's why the average payment is around $1,200 a month, because folks don't think far enough ahead. And I know in the previous session there was a pretty stark sort of realization that folks are kind of in a jam. Well, if we start thinking about one of the solutions, if we start thinking about Social Security a little bit sooner, and maybe in our 50s or what have you, maybe we can think about things like maybe taking delays in terms of delaying taking payments and building more payments up as we get older. I have an example on that in a little bit. So let's talk about spousal retirement benefits just for a second. So for a spousal retirement benefit, a spouse can receive a benefit if you're married at least 1 year, and they can collect up to 1/2 of their spouse's benefit. Very simple. Key here is that spouse has to be 62 years old. Okay, that's one of the keys. Now, one of the caveats here, though, is what? If you take your spouse's benefit at 62, what does the Social Security look? What does the administration look at in terms of the calculation? They say, okay, you want to take a look at your spouse's benefit, okay, which is typically half of what your spouse would be able to get, or your own benefit. So if you're looking at taking that benefit at 62, the administration may make you take your own benefit early. So if you have a potential of if you don't need the money, it might behoove you to hold off until the full retirement age. Okay, so once you hit full retirement age, one of the interesting things is, at full retirement age, is you have when you file for a spousal benefit, you can actually file for half of your spouse's benefit. And then you can actually delay your own until 70 and accumulate more credits. I have an example of that coming up too. Divorced spouse retirement benefit. This is interesting. A divorced spouse, if they've never been remarried, and if they've been married for at least 10 years up until when the divorce is final, and also if they've been divorced for 2 years, is eligible for the divorced spouse benefit. Now, interestingly, that first bullet, if you're never remarried, there's one caveat there too. You will not lose that benefit if you marry someone who's receiving a survivor benefit. So if in other words, if you're receiving the divorced spouse retirement benefit, and you marry someone who's not taking their own benefit, but they're receiving a widower's benefit or survivor benefit, it won't cancel this payment out. Okay? By the way, the other thing too is you have to be 62 years old, but interestingly, in order to take this benefit, unlike the spousal retirement benefit, if the divorced spouse retirement benefit is elected, that former spouse does not have to have elected to take their Social Security benefit at that point. So, so in the spousal retirement benefit, the only way you can get that is if the primary spouse has filed for their benefit and then the spouse files for their spousal benefit. I didn't confuse anybody, did I? There's a lot going on here. My wife's an actuary. She follows this right with me. So I'm serious, she's an actuary. That was a joke. Come on, folks. I know it's Social Security. We got to jazz it up somehow, right? So let's talk about retirement benefits for family members. So family members eligible to receive benefits include, as I mentioned, spouses 62 years or older, younger spouses if you're caring for a child younger than 16 or the disabled, former spouses 62 and older, just mentioned that, children up to age 18 or up to 19 if they're full-time students or not yet graduated from high school, and the last one, disabled children, even if they're age 18 or older. The key with that particular bullet point is the child has to be disabled prior to age 22. This is actually a good slide to keep in your book here. So, what's the best age to apply for benefits? The question is being asked today, when do I start taking them? I mentioned that when folks they look at taking benefits, they hit age 62 and they say, I can get it, why not take it? Guess how many folks take that benefit at age 62, what percentage? Go on. 85%. That was very close. 85% of people take the benefit early. I was doing a seminar actually with Dave's brother. Dave's brother covers mutual funds out in Maryland, and we did a client seminar a couple weeks ago, and it was a dinner, and it was only probably 10 or 12 folks. And the lady sitting next to me, we were talking about this. She literally had just filed for Social Security benefits a couple weeks before, and we were talking about delay credits, and if you don't really need to take take the money. There are certain things you need to watch out for, and we'll talk about that in a second. But she said, I just filed because I thought I could get it. I didn't think about anything else. I just, well, it's there, I may as well take it. So we'll talk about full retirement age and the differences in a second. But by the end of the dinner, she said, can I not take my benefits? And it's like, yeah, you can cancel your benefits as long as it's in the first year. There used to be a provision where the Social Security Administration would allow you to go back, even if you've been taking it for 3 or 4 years, you could suspend your benefits and pay it all back in. Well, they changed that in 2011, so it's only within the first year. So if you've been taking benefits, they'll allow you to pay it back and then suspend it. So that's a little bit of a change. All right, so taking benefits depends on life expectancy, marital status, whether you're still working and things like that. So as so when we think about retirement in terms of the three-legged stool, what are the 3 legs of the stool in retirement? This is one of them, Social Security. Sure, personal savings, private savings, investments. The third are pensions. Anybody here covered by a pension? Yeah. It's literally, every time I ask the question, very few hands go up. The reality of it is, over the past 20 years, the availability of pensions has declined by 75%. So active pensions, Kath, how many pensions does ING write nowadays? Yeah. So, case in point.
That's a 0.
I did defined contribution plans and a little bit of defined benefit work in my early years at the Hartford, and I can tell you that defined contribution was the far and away the most business that we did, and then defined benefit, nobody's doing those anymore. It just costs too much to fund. So let's talk about full Social Security retirement benefits. It's a sliding scale, so basically anybody born between 1943 and 1954, your full retirement age is 66 years old. It's a sliding scale so that if you're born in 1960 or later, your full retirement age is 67. So basically until we hit the year 2020, everybody's full retirement age is going to be 66. Piece of cake. So let's talk about if you're single and you're taking benefits early. Right here, we have reduced retirement benefit here. If 2,000 was a protected full benefit amount, and then you take it at 62, basically you're going to have about a 25% reduction in your monthly benefit. So in this case, 2,000 was the projected full benefit amount. 1,500 if they retired at 62 and started taking the benefit. That bullet point up there, remember, the reduced benefit is permanent, is a big one. Folks need to understand that when they take it early, it can't be changed. It's going to be permanent. All right. Now, the way they figure this out, it's kind of interesting. Is when it's when you take your benefit prior to full retirement age, they reduce the benefit by about 0.5% per month for each month that you take it prior to 66 in this case. All right, so here we are, 25% age 62. So some of the things here, we'll hit on this in a second too. If they receive benefits while they're employed, for 2012, the earnings limit is $14,640. So if somebody makes, as long as they're below 14,640, they're not going to have their security benefit reduced. I have an example coming up on that too. So, what if you're married and you're taking benefits early? So in this case, again, $2,000 was the projected full amount. $1,500 was $1,500 age 62. The spouse wants to file for a benefit. The spouse gets up to 50% of their primary spouse's benefit. So in this case, $750. So remember what I mentioned earlier is when the spouse files for that benefit, the Social Security Administration is going to look at that spouse and say, okay, which is higher? Is your own benefit higher, or is your spousal benefit higher? Whichever is higher, they're going to make that spouse take. So if they don't need the money and they can hold off till full retirement age, it's best if that spouse doesn't take the earlier benefit and they wait till full retirement age to get to hold it over. Okay, so let's see here. The survivor benefit is 100% right at the bottom. 100% of primary workers benefit if they're at least 66 when the spouse elects. I'm not going to do a deep dive on that because I have a case study on that one. This is one of the important things I wanted to bring up, and we're all pretty much on top of this. Sometimes clients don't understand how this works, though, in terms of the reduction in benefit. So, for 2012, they actually bumped this dollar amount up to $14,640. I forgot what it was last year. It was still in the $14,000 range. But prior to hitting full retirement age, they're going to reduce the benefit $1 for every two in earnings over that dollar amount. Okay. So people hit that, they hit that threshold. It's not going to, they're just going to have a reduction in their Social Security benefit over that dollar amount. Now, in the year that they hit full retirement age, that actually changes a little bit, and that number went up this year as well, to $38,880. So in the year that full retirement age is reached, they actually they'll actually take $1 for every three over $38,880. Okay. I have an example of that coming up as well. But one thing I wanted to point out here, what folks forget sometimes is that when they hit full retirement age, this clause goes out the window. It's not a permanent thing. I'll give you an example. My dad's a retired police officer from Connecticut. He retired down in North Carolina. And he's real estate, all kinds of stuff. And he came, a couple of years ago, he said, Steve, I don't want to hit that threshold. And he said, well, Pop, you hit the threshold, it's okay, you're going to have your benefits reduced, but you're making money, right? So, but one thing that folks really don't understand is that for every time you have something reduced off of your benefit, when you hit full retirement age, you actually start to get that back. The Social Security Administration doesn't they just don't keep it. So if you think about it, you don't get it as a lump sum. What they'll do is they'll recalculate at full retirement age the amount of times or the amount that you went over those thresholds, and they'll build it back into your check on a go-forward basis once you hit full retirement age, and that's an automatic. All right. So that's one of the things too. I'm worried about hitting the threshold. Don't fret, because you will ultimately get it back. Unless you die at full retirement age. So not to be morbid. Okay, this slide here, I want to make one quick note. If you're following along in your book, this is about the delay in retirement benefits. If your year of birth is 1944, actually if it's after 1943, the annual increase is going to be 8%. That's a typo in the slide, so these numbers are actually going to be a little bit bigger. But basically the way it works is if you delay your benefit at full retirement age, and you can delay it at most up to age 70, so you can delay it for 3 years. Beyond 70, you can't delay it anymore. You're going to get a credit if you were born after 1943 of 8% per year. Not bad. That's pretty good. Has anybody received 8% in the market in the past couple of years? That's not a bad deal, right? So it just to kind of put it in a nutshell, if in this case, I'll just use the numbers we have up here, but if the benefit was $2,140, well, if they waited until 70 years old, the annual increase would actually be $5,401, or it would be $2,450 per month. So if you have the means to be able to delay it, hey, why not? And by the way, the threshold, sometimes folks say, well, I'm not gonna live long enough to enjoy it. Well, if you take retirement early, essentially at age 78, that's where diminishing returns come in, if you take retirement early. At age 78, if you wait until full retirement age, you would have lost the bet. If you wait till full retirement age, your threshold is about 80, and then at age 82, if you delay, if you live to age 82, you've beat the bank. Okay, so there's it's not a real big window of time. And if you think about longevity nowadays, I mean, the average person, if you're 65 years old, if you're a male, you have a 49% chance of reaching 86 years old. If you're a 65-year-old male, you have a pretty decent chance of reaching 86. If you're a 65-year-old female, you have a 49% chance of hitting 89. Not bad odds. And if you're a married couple at age 65, you're actually going to have about a 1 in 3 chance of one of you hitting 95 years old. So, I mean, it's pretty decent odds there, especially with today's benefits. So, let's talk about another thing that sometimes poses some confusion. It's the taxation on Social Security benefits. Does anybody have any questions there? Do you have any questions? What's going on? Taxation on Social Security. So, this is one of the things where sometimes folks get things a little bit confused. Going back to the full retirement age and the reduction in your benefit, remember that goes away. That reduction in benefit goes away at full retirement age. Taxation on your Social Security benefits never goes away. So if you live to 150 years old, probably if you live to 150 years old, the amount that they're going to tax you will be a little bit different. But no, if you live, no matter how long you live, the taxation on your benefits is always going to come into play. So there's a couple of thresholds here. If you're single, the threshold is $25,000. And if you're married, filing jointly, the threshold is $32,000. So from that perspective, there won't be any taxation as long as your provisional income is below those amounts. Now, if you're between 25 and 34 single, and 32 or 44 joint, your benefit's going to be taxed at 50%. Not at 50%, but 50% of the benefit's going to be taxed. Okay? And then if your threshold, you cross this threshold is 34,000 and 44,000 respectively, well, it's going to be an 85%. 85% of the benefit's going to be taxed. Okay, so there are some ways to try to prepare for things like that, but right now that's the way it is. And I mean, this is one thing I personally heard bubbling up. I haven't heard it. I only heard it once, but there was something about in that top threshold. They're saying it might even be like 100% tax on the benefit. One of these things.
Can you define what you mean by provisional income?
I am so glad you asked that question.
I should have looked at it.
Again, because this is just a straight talk on Social Security discussion, I'm not going to do a deep dive on provisional income, but what I wanted to do is just cover a few things. So if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, basically it's an adjusted gross income, non-taxable interest, and half of your Social Security benefits. What does it include? What does provisional income include? Municipal bonds, interest from treasury bills, notes, and bonds, and then taxable income from pension payments, IRA withdrawals, traditional IRA withdrawals, and IRA conversions. Okay, so there are some ways, and we'll talk about in a second, ways to help reduce the exposure here. But and dividends, by the way, this is not a comprehensive list, so dividends are included there as well. So, how do we? Some ways to reduce provisional income. Well, muni bonds, right? Well, you say muni bonds is includable in provisional income, but suppose you're coming up against one of those thresholds. Maybe you take some money and you include muni bond income as opposed to other types of income to keep you below the threshold. Roth IRAs. This is an interesting point. The money that comes out of Roth IRAs is not included in provisional income. I was doing a meeting out in, it was Columbus, Ohio. I did a lunchtime session at a Morgan Stanley branch, and we were doing a walkthrough afterwards. It was kind of cool because sometimes when I do these discussions, I wonder if people just kind of sit there for the credit or if they really listen. So we were doing a walkthrough. It was about an hour and a half later, and an advisor came out of his office. He had just finished up a meeting with a client. He says, "Hey, Steve, that thing on Roth for provisional income, that was ACEs." I'm like, "Really?" Like, I could think of other things that are ACEs, but he said, no, seriously, I just met with this guy. He's an engineer. He nails me on everything. And then I said, "Oh, by the way, did you make a contribution to your Roth IRA for provisional income purposes?" It set him back in his seat. It's like, oh, all right. So people actually do listen sometimes. Life insurance. Proceeds that are, if you take tax-free loans and withdrawals, they're not included in provisional income. Another thing too is deferred annuities, tax-deferred annuities. Yeah, income coming out of an annuity is includable in provisional income. But if you consider that you have the control of when to take money out of it, if you're going to be hitting a threshold or not, you can decide not to take money maybe out of that this year. Maybe if you can get it from another source if you needed the income. But so that's one way to help control whether you hit provisional income. So, we're in the home stretch, folks. So, case study number 1, we have Ron Roberts. He's divorced, and this is just an example on the reduction in Social Security benefits. So, he's divorced. He's born June 1st. He's 65 years old. He's working with benefits. So, what are the impacts of working, filing temporarily reduces the benefit? At 2012, the year prior to full retirement age, what's the scenario? He's in the year prior to his full retirement age. $1 for every 2 over $14,640. Correct? Pretty straightforward. But once he hits that year hits the year where he hits full retirement age, that's where that threshold goes up to $38,880. Is $1 for every 3 over that amount. And then once he hits the month that he's in full retirement age, the reduction in benefits goes away. So that's just a real nutshell way to kind of think about it, and it's in the book. So. Now this is a great example on survivor benefits in a way to defer an individual's benefit and potentially get a higher individual benefit down the road. So we have Betty Barnes. She's widowed. She's 68 years old, so she's beyond full retirement age. She was able to elect survivor benefits, full survivor benefits on her husband. For the past 3 years. So what should be discussed to validate the choice here? What's the main question to make sure she made the right choice? How much is her benefit, and how much will it be when she at age 70 when she pulls it out? Will it be more than her survivor benefit that she's getting from her husband? Yeah, if it makes sense to do what she's doing, as long as her benefit's going to be higher when she hits age 70. So just again. If you have any questions, you can take up with it. All right, this is an interesting one as well. Kind of a trick question. Down your toes here. Joe and Jane Johnston, they're married, ages 64 and 59. Joe's salary is $150,000, so he's doing okay. Could Jane elect spousal benefits without reducing Joe's?
No.
Why couldn't she? She's not 62. Right? That was a little catch there. So when she's 62, she certainly could elect benefits. So the key here is you have to be 62 years old when you elect spousal benefits. Again, going from a divorced spouse perspective, they don't have to. She has to be 62 years old, but the husband doesn't have to have filed yet. Okay? So remember, we mentioned that the whole divorce thing is a little bit of a caveat there, but in this case, yeah, she has to wait till she's 62 years old. What are the pros and cons of early versus delayed start of benefits? What they could do here is they could have Joe turn on the benefit. He could turn on his benefit. Jane could elect to take the spousal benefit when she's 62. Joe turns it off, okay? And then Jane continues to collect. What happens here is Joe delays until he's 70 years old. And what happens? A, he gets a higher check at 70, but B, there's also a higher spousal death benefit on this. So, in other words, he passes away before Jane. When Jane hits 66, she'll be able to elect a full spousal benefit and get the higher benefit amount. So, I know there's a few moving parts here, but there are about 300 different scenarios. By the way, I was doing this in Connecticut a couple weeks ago, and this thing went like an hour and a half because there were so many people asking questions. So wait a second, let's catch up later. But seriously, so if you have any questions, I bring that up because the Social Security Administration is a great resource. SSA.gov they have a terrific calculator on their website. If clients haven't looked at it, or if you haven't looked at it, it's really it's a good resource. You can call them. They have really sharp people there. We call them all the time because our team doesn't have all the answers. But there are literally so many different scenarios to look at. If a client comes in and you want to with a specific question, really, it is a specific question to that client. They'll look up the exact scenario and really be able to help you out quite a bit. But Anyway, that's really pretty much it in a nutshell. Just, just keep in mind, just, for changes, I know just looking up in the Social Security bill, the cost of living adjustments this year, there weren't any for the past couple. And really just, not a whole lot, of an update on legislation, but, probably look for sometime next year. Any general questions? Super. Well, thanks a lot. Oh, and, make sure you sign out, sign in, sign out, in the back, yeah.
I just have one question. So regarding the survivor's benefits or widow's pension, I guess,
Yeah.
same work. So if they start receiving them because the spouse had died and then they reach retirement age themselves, how does that work? Can they receive both?
No, you know what it is, if they elect a spousal benefit, it's gonna be a reduced benefit prior to 66 years old. If they want to get the full spousal, survivor benefit, they have to wait till 66. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right, well, we'll be around afterwards, just make sure you sign out for 12 o'clock, and that, again, as Dave mentioned, it's legible, so in case our CD guy, we can get in touch with him, make sure you get the right credits, you know,
One thing real quick, I failed to mention this in my opening comments. If you don't know your license number, I know we have so many things we gotta remember. We can look up your Pennsylvania license number by your social security number. So it's one or the other. Sorry, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Thanks again for coming.